Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and that is Jay, and today we are talking about Kobbie Mainoo. What is going on with Kobbie Mainoo? It's been a difficult, I don't want to say 12 months because the Euro is included in that, but it's been a difficult season for Kobbie Mainoo. His manager's left, his new manager doesn't seem to quite have a place for him. He's gone from being one of the first names on the team sheet to not being sure what position he's going to play on any given weekend. We want to talk about him, his talent and how he can fit under Ruben Amorim if, we have to ask this question, if he can fit, if there is a future for Kobbie Mainoo, because these are all things that are being asked over the summer, and especially with the transfer window opening up. Who knows what the future holds for Kobbie Mainoo? So let's first of all start a little bit with just some general talk around Kobbie. How highly do you rate him, even after this season? Where do you see Kobbie Mainoo and his sort of ceiling as a player?
I think the sky's the limit for Kobbie Mainoo. I do, and I've watched United for a long time. And it's so rare to see an 18-year-old break into the first team in midfield, in central midfield. We're not talking about a winger here. We've seen wingers like come on, Garnacho or Giggs or whoever. Januzaj. But for a central midfielder to not just get into the United side, but basically keep his place for a season and become vital to that team and end up lifting a trophy and being player of the match in the final as well, was almost unheard of. So he was a breath of fresh air, Kobbie Mainoo, when he came in. And I think you look at his abilities that he's got. He's fantastic on the ball. He carries the ball well, especially over sort of 10 yards. There's a player there. There is. And we saw that. When he came into the side, you were like, wow. And we saw it in the academy. Don't forget as well, at the academy level, he was a little bit younger than everyone else. So his teammates were like 17, 18. He was 15, 16. And he was doing bits in that academy team. Obviously helped win us the FA Youth Cup as well. So there's definitely a player there. His ceiling, I think, is sky high, and I want to see more of him. I want to see him find a role in this team. I know you're going to get into that shortly, because I would hate for United to give up on him, to say, oh, he's not quite had the season, he's not kicked on this season, oh, I don't know if there's a role for him. He could have another 15 years at this club, genuinely. He could, and I think at this age, he's nowhere near reached his potential yet. Because he's had such a bright start, people looking at that as going, oh, he's peaked. He's not, has it? How many 18, 19-year-old midfielders do you know that the finished article? I think when Roy Keane was 18, he was still playing in Ireland. Like, you cannot just look at an 18, 19 or a 20-year-old as he's now and think, that's the finished article. It isn't. And there's a player there, I know you're going to get into it, that we should work with and get the very best out of, because I think in terms of his ability, in terms of his mindset and his attitude, he's second to none.
Why do you think it hasn't worked this season? Because like you said, it hasn't. It's not been terrible. I've never watched Kobbie Mainoo and go, what is this guy doing? I've literally never said that in any game he's ever played. But that incredible momentum that we saw from November 2023 to sort of end of June or July 2024, culminating in that Euros final, with England, is momentum like I've never really seen before. It was Rooney-esque in terms of he's not even guaranteed to be in the first team squad, and now he's a pivotal part for Man United winning the FA Cup and England trying to win the Euros. That momentum has slowed and stalled massively, hasn't it? Why do you think we've seen this season unfold the way that it has?
Well, there's a multitude of reasons. For starters, he's had injuries. Yeah, he has. Now, you look at the stats, and I think he's played certainly more Premier League games, I think, this season than the previous season. But what happened was he was injured at the beginning of the season. When he was injured in pre-season, we was in Houston. Last year, in Houston, I think it was, against Real Madrid. He got injured in the second minute or whatever. So he didn't start until November. So he's basically, season started in November, and then he played almost every game from November till both the club and country. You're right to the Euros final. It was a phenomenal run. This season, he's been in and out of the team with injuries. He's had one injury, he's had another injury. He's not really got going because of injuries. Plus, the manager who's brought him through has left. You had a caretaker manager for a little bit. Then you've had Ruben Amorim comes in with a new system, with a new style, new formation, a revolving door of teammates. I've said this about a lot of players, but for a youngster who's still learning his craft, that's not easy. And then we've seen him used in different positions. At one point, he was used as was it against Crystal Palace? He was like a striker or a false nine, but basically he was a striker for us, wasn't it? Because Ruben Amorim was like, well, he could do a job in that position, so we'll try him there. So that's not easy, because you're still sort of finding your place and learning sort of how you're going to fit into the team. Then you're trying in a position that you've never really played before, certainly not for Manchester United first team. So that's not easy either. So I do think there's a multitude of reasons. I don't think it's one. I think when you add all those different reasons together, that just makes for a very hard and sort of testing time for a young player who, in an ideal world, he'd have come into a Manchester United team with a manager that knows that's sort of long-term manager, with teammates that are there long-term, and it'd be all settled. But one minute he's playing against alongside someone like Casemiro, the next it's Bruno, the next it's your guy, the next it might be Mason Mount, the next minute it might be up front, one minute it's Ten Hag who's his manager, then it's Ruben Amorim. So it's not easy for a young player. And I always go back to, and I hate to use this as an example, but I do think that it's an example of how a young player can come into a side and it just be sort of almost perfect for him. You look at over at Manchester City with Phil Foden when he came in, he was coming into a side that was flying. He was gradually brought in over 12 appearances in his first season, 20 in his second or whatever it was, little cameos, then it became more starts and brought into a side that has loads of possession, loads of the ball, rested when he was maybe a bit leggy or he had an injury that wasn't quite fully, made him 100%. That's how it should be done with a young player. It hasn't been like that with Kobbie Mainoo. And there's been times when perhaps he probably did need a breather and he wasn't given one. And there's been times when he didn't need a breather, he probably needed to start, and that didn't happen.
It seems like watching, you mentioned there, like Amorim played him as like you said, up front basically, whether it's a false nine or not. He's the furthest forward player in the centre of the pitch. You're playing up front. He played him up front. He played him as a 6 or, the deepest of the midfielders. In the past, he's played him as a 10 as well. I think under Ten Hag, he kind of played a couple of different positions, but largely it was in one of those two deeper positions, wasn't it? It was next to a Casemiro, or it was next to Bruno at times. It was next to Eriksen, I think, at times as well.
That's a shout.
But it was pretty obvious where he was going to play when he did play. Then there was all this talk about, he can play as a 10. And it's like, Amorim played him as a 10. I think it was like 1 or 2 games. And then went, actually, I'm going to push him even further. And then we had the Crystal Palace game that we've mentioned. So it's almost like Amorim doesn't seem to know where he wants to play him. Is that a worry for you? That there seems to be some kind of disconnect. The gears aren't quite lining up between him and his positioning and Amorim's system.
It is slightly. I think you saw it for it can work, like the Lyon game. People forget that. Without Kobbie Mainoo, I mean, I know it ultimately we didn't win, but the season would have been over during that game because that composure and that finish, when he was more or less up front, was saved our season to a certain degree, albeit briefly. So it can work, obviously, moving around, but ultimately he needs a position. And I think one thing that will help both Kobbie Mainoo and Ruben Amorim is the new signings we've made. Because all of a sudden now, you've not just brought one player in who can potentially play in number 10, you brought 2.
Yeah.
So that maybe gives them a bit of clarity. That maybe answers that question for both Ruben Amorim and Kobbie Mainoo. Are you going to play Kobbie Mainoo as a 10 when you've just brought 2 number 10s in? No.
And you've got Ahmad there.
And you've got Ahmad there.
You Mason Mount.
Mason Mount.
Yeah.
So you're not going to do that, are you? If you look at if the Mbomo deal gets done, we're looking at around 50 million, around 60 million for Cunha. Ahmad, I think, was up to 40 million, and Mason Mount was around 50 million. You're not going to spend 200 million quid on 10s and then use the academy player who's not really a 10 probably anyway as your number 10. That's just not. I know Ruben Amorim didn't bring in all those players, but it's not going to happen, is it? No. So then you go, okay, well, if I'm going to keep Kobbie Mainoo, what am I going to do with him? Well, play him in the position that he came into the side as. Now, I wouldn't mind of seeing Kobbie Mainoo get a run as a 10, but this was before we bought 2 more. So I'm not stupid. I don't expect Mateus Cunha to be sat on the bench when Kobbie Mainoo's starting every game. So you know that you're probably not going to need him as a 10. You've got all those options, and the good options as well. They're not just, should we give him a go? They're tailor-made for that position, all the players you just mentioned. So then you go, okay, then where can Kobbie Mainoo play? He's not a defender. He's not a wing-back, and he's not a striker.
Yeah.
So where does he play? Well, he plays in one of those midfield roles. So stick him there. Now, Gary Neville's been talking about this, about getting the best out of him, how he doesn't want to see Kobbie Mainoo sold. He said it's not just because he's an academy graduate. There's nothing wrong with selling academy graduates. That's going to happen. Rashford's going to go. Garnacho's going to go. They've both come through the academy. It's not about just saving the academy graduates. This is a player who is an immense talent, who can play in a position we need him for, and that position should be one of those midfield roles.
Yeah, I think he's actually been hurt a little bit this season by his teammates because, I think because of Casemiro's resurgence and his kind of ball playing ability in that area, he's been playing a lot, and I think. Next to Casemiro, I don't think Mainoo works. Not anymore. Maybe 2 years ago when, or last season even when Casemiro had a little bit more legs, or 5 years ago it would have been fine. But Casemiro doesn't have the legs. Mainoo's one of his weaknesses, which we'll get onto, is his sort of maybe athleticism. It certainly is kind of 15 to 20 yard bursts.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that top end speed that you see from certain other players, maybe that's something that lets him down a little bit. I don't think they can work together. So, and because, this season we've seen a lot of Bruno and Casemiro, or Bruno and Ugarte, or Casemiro and Ugarte, I'm not sure Mainoo works that well with any of them. I don't think he's got the defensive ability to go alongside Bruno. I don't think he's got the legs to go alongside Casemiro. Maybe him and Ugarte could work, but we've not really seen that. So I think what would actually help him a lot is if United brought in the type of player we need in midfield anyway, an athletic, high volume in terms of runs, ball-playing defensive midfielder. Someone, it won't be him, but we spoke about this before, someone like a Declan Rice.
We've seen it for England, haven't we?
Someone who has a great engine on him.
Yeah.
I know Rice isn't particularly quick, but because he's so sort of, his cardio is so good and he's such a runner, he covers ground across the pitch without being lightning. Someone like that next to Mainoo, I think, could work brilliantly. Someone like a Roy Keane, for instance, or someone that is an absolute machine in terms of their energy, next to Mainoo works really well. I just think at the moment, because we're trying to patch in an old Casemiro and Ugarte's not fully found his feet and Bruno has to play, I think that with a different partner, that could really work. Do you think we don't necessarily have the right partner for him yet?
Maybe. The one thing I'm hoping that, I get your point, and I agree with all of it. I think Declan Rice and Mainoo for England, and I think international football is a little bit easier than Premier League football.
Of course.
Yeah, it just is. But I think they complemented each other quite well in that Euros run. You could see that the traits that they both had, it was just like the perfect sort of partnership for that team. Now I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, if Mainoo is going to play in that midfield, who does he need alongside him? Casemiro had a little bit of a purple patch, didn't he, in the Europa and did quite well. Is that going to continue and can he play alongside Mainoo? I don't think he can. Ugarte, I think the jury's still out. We've all agreed on that. We've seen some good performances, some things we like. We've also seen a few troubling games where the manager seems to have fell out with him almost, especially that West Ham game, where it just wasn't good enough by any stretch of the imagination. So you think, okay, have we got the personnel there? The one thing I'm curious about is Bruno. Now, I understand your point, but I'm looking at Bruno now and I'm thinking, if we've got these two 10s that are going to do the heavy lifting, we're creating and carrying the ball and getting goals and assists, which we've spoken about in a video we did yesterday, does that encourage Bruno to play a different role? And can the manager work with Bruno and say, look, can we try you two together here? But don't worry about you having to do everything and create everything, because we've got two players we've just brought in who are going to do that. So I'm not saying Bruno Fernandes can't get involved in assists and goals and playing through balls and stuff like that. Of course he can. It's his, it's in his DNA. Yeah. But maybe he has a slightly different role in this new look United team. And maybe that can complement Kobbie Mainoo a little bit more. Because if that could work, and it's a big could, that would be great. That would be ideal if we can make that work. If it can't, if you go, well, actually, Bruno just isn't that guy and we can't make him be that guy, then maybe Kobbie Mainoo, for the sort of immediate future, maybe he doesn't start every game. Maybe he is a rotational option. That's not the end of the world. That's not the end of the world if Kobbie Mainoo's not starting every game. For me, what would be far worse is if we got rid of him too soon. Yeah. If we didn't give him an opportunity. You need options. Now, other than Bruno Fernandes, every player gets injured, every player has, dips, every player needs a rest or whatever. I know we've not got European football, but how many players genuinely play 38 Premier League games a season? None. Yeah. Like, Bruno is the only one. It just doesn't happen, unless you're Gary Pallister. Yeah. It just doesn't happen.
Or Harry Maguire 5 years ago.
Harry Maguire 5 years ago. So it doesn't mean that if you were to have Bruno playing every game and then rotate it, Kobbie Mainoo necessarily starts every game. But I certainly want him in that squad. And I certainly think that you could try him and Bruno, see if that can work in this new look United side. And in answer to your question about other players alongside him, I don't see there's a standout candidate there. No. I just don't.
No, and I think one thing we definitely need from next season is working out where he's going to play. Because he needs that for his career as well. Yeah. I think we saw with Rashford, I think one of the things that disrupted his development was, is he a winger? Is he a number 9? Is he a right winger? Is he, actually no, let's try him up front again because we've only got Vegas. No, that's not working. Let's put him back on the left. I think, and of course, lots of players rotate. Wayne Rooney would play on the left wing, would play as a 10, would play as a number 9. Or, people have these options. You don't want someone to necessarily be completely fixed in their ways. But finding a place for him in the team is very important. Whether it's multiple places and you're great in all of them like Rooney was, or certainly just at least knowing in the back of his head, when I play, this is what I do.
I think he needs that. That helps. That's also about clarity. Yeah. And I also think we should give a mention as well, because people were getting in the comments and having a dig us for not talking about Joshua Zirkzee enough when we spoke about attacking options.
I forgot about him.
Because he's still a player who's still a very entertaining player and on the ball, and he might thrive with a little bit more around him. He might be a player, but he's another player that's probably going to play in one of those sets. If he does stay at United, maybe use him as a 9, but he said he's a 9.5, which is nonsense. He's a 10 for me. So it's another person in the way of Kobbie Mainoo, and another person we've spent a lot of money on. So is it realistic for Kobbie Mainoo to play as a 10? Probably not.
I think someone like, you see Caicedo at Chelsea. I think he could work next to Mainoo. Look at the role that Enzo Fernandez has for Chelsea. He's been chipping in with a lot more goals this season. He seems to have had a bit more freedom with Caicedo doing his running for him. Or, it can be, I know Caicedo's more sort of diminutive and energetic. You could be a sort of a leggier, more physical sort of type player next to him as well. But I do think he needs someone that is going to do his running. Maybe Bruno can do that running.
Maybe Bruno can. Bruno's got so much energy. One thing I love about Bruno, it's the 93rd minute. You're 2-1 up against Liverpool at home. Erik ten Hag's first win is on the line, and Bruno Fernandes runs a length of the pitch and dives into a perfectly timed tackle. He's got that in him. He does stuff like that, and it kind of goes under the radar. His energy levels are ridiculous, and maybe if you're asking him to do that sort of role alongside Mainoo, it can work. Because Mainoo's a very intelligent player, and so is Bruno. They've got that intelligence where you think, okay, if you give them the specific roles within that double pivot, they could work it out. Another longer term option might be Toby Collier. I'm interested to see what happens with him. I don't know. I'm not saying next season, maybe even further down. There's no reason to believe that in 2 or 3 years you might not see Collier and Mainoo as your 2 midfielders. That could happen, and he's got legs, but it's so early days. And you talk about Kobbie Mainoo having a difficult season. Toby Collier has just been thrown into an absolute bin fire, hasn't it? I mean, got injured, and also, was it 2-0 down against Liverpool and you're placing Casemiro at half-time as your Premier League debut? Nice one, bro. Do you know? Thanks for that, Eric. I mean, horrible
One
situation.
final thing to sort of talk about with Mainoo, obviously, is what can he do? Because this is all stuff that the manager can do, that the club can do. There's been reports that there's going to be work on sort of almost like sprint-style training, ways to improve his athleticism and stuff like that. And to a certain degree, you're born with what you're born with in terms of your muscles, the way your biochemistry is. You can't change a lot of that. But you can increase jump length, you can increase sprint speed and stride length, and understand your mechanics and do particular sort of plyometrics and stuff that people do, where you can work on being a bit quicker over the first 5 yards, and you can work on how you pump your arms and pump your legs and all that sort of stuff. Do you think that there's an onus on him, or do you think he's too young to be working on getting fitter, getting stronger, getting faster? Is that something that will help him, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think now's the time to do that. Do it while you're 20. Do it while you're still relatively early on in your career. There's nothing wrong with that. We saw, I think it was your mate, our mate, I was going to say your mate like I fell out with him, Laurie Whitwell, on his article. I think he spoke about Mason Mount benefiting from the sprint expert they brought in, and how he was showing him how to use his arms differently in runs. Mason Mount's in his mid-20s. He's played hundreds of games at the top level, and he was benefiting from something new that he didn't know about. This guy who's worked with elite athletes, Olympic gold medalists, was saying, actually, when you run, you're not getting the full sort of speed you can, because you're not running like a sprinter, you're running like a footballer. Showed him the difference, and he benefited from that. So why can't Kobbie Mainoo? I think the good thing about Kobbie Mainoo is there's something to work with there. He's got the brains to do it. He's got the physicality. He looks after himself. He might not be the perfect athlete in terms of his speed or whatever, but he's a fit young lad.
He's not out of shape.
No, and there is never any question about his mindset or his attitude. We never hear. The only slight sort of criticism some people had is when there was these reports that he wants a new contract on 200, and even that's been pushed back on by members of his camp or his agent or whatever. So there's never a thing of like Kobbie Mainoo, is he applying himself? Is he out too much? Is he rattling the fans by sticking the fingers up at him? None of that. He just gets on with it, and everyone who's worked with him alongside him raves about him in training. And I know it doesn't tell you the full story, but whenever we see footage of him in training, he always looks like he's one of the shining stars. So there's obviously a very talented, determined young man there who, from what we gather, loves Manchester United. Work with him, man. Gary Neville nailed it. That's a player we should be working with. That's a player Manchester United should be going, right, we've got someone here, let's get the best out of him. And let's not make the mistakes we've made with some other players where, you mentioned there, Anna Januzaj is a perfect example. Does well, you throw him in, loses his mojo, keeps getting played until he's almost useless here. Ditto Anthony Elanga. Garnacho's slightly different because I think it's more on him than the club, but it's not working out.
It's a similar situation.
Though, We've done it with so many players. When's the last time we had an academy player come through that actually fulfilled his potential and spent a long time at Manchester United?
I mean, Rashford's the closest to that. But
Yeah,
look how
and
that's
that ended in tears. And even along the way, there was quite a few ups and downs. So you're probably going back to the Fergie era, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because even Scott McTominay.
Probably Darren Fletcher.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's one of the latter day academy graduates under Sir Alex Ferguson, which is just sad to see. So this is one we can get right, and we could get right, because I love Kobbie Mainoo, and I think there's a player there, and I'd be gutted to see him go. And I hope that because we've made all the moves in the transfer window, and it looks like Garnacho's going to go, it looks like Rashford's out the door, it looks like even Sancho isn't going to stick around, even though Chelsea don't want him. I think we can make money there without having to sell someone like Kobbie Mainoo.
Yeah, completely agree. Right, thank you very much for joining us. Get your thoughts in on Kobbie Mainoo in the comments below. Are you worried about him? Do you think you should sell him? Do you think we should keep him? And like we said, over the next few years, build a team around him almost. Thank you very much for joining us. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll see you in a bit.